Hello, it's Martin back with the wisely issued Mini Electric. As you have probably seen on the channel, I've done a lot of coverage of the car and it has genuinely been mostly positive because there is a lot to like. I've now been it for quite a few months and it's almost time to hand it back. And unfortunately, just like with anything, it's not perfect. And there are some things which I have discovered during the months of ownership which are absolutely driving me crazy. So that's what we will discover in today's video. You may think, oh, it definitely has to be range and charging because that's what is mostly publicized as the biggest drawback of this vehicle. It's quite a small battery size by modern car standards and the charging is not class leading either at 50 kilowatts. But that's all just on paper, because the range, as you have seen from the tests I've done on the channel, is very consistent regardless of temperature and how aggressively you drive. So at least you get 100 miles of real-world range pretty much in any conditions you will get in the UK, maybe a little bit lower if you do a lot of cold starts in the winter. Likewise, the charging, not class leading at 50 kilowatts, but at least in practice the car doesn't mind being rapid charged even with a cold battery. You will very quickly get to those 50 kilowatts, so there are no issues with cold gating. And likewise, on the other end of the spectrum, if it gets very hot, even on a hot summer's day, and even if you do 3, 4, 5 rapid charging sessions in quick succession in a single day when you're doing a longer trip, there is no rapid gating either. So that's all good. Ironically, let's start with the number one thing which I find annoying, and it's what Mini is usually praised for, and I found this a bit surprising, but if you actually dig a little bit deeper, it's not that shocking, and that's the build quality. And I know this will upset a few Mini fans, because this is an example which is made in Oxford. The newer Mini Electrics are now shifting production into China, and many people are worried about what will happen to the quality. But to be fair, this made in the UK example is not perfect either. So if we start from the bonnet, it's a very complicated piece because it's a clamshell bonnet, which means that the top of the bonnet spills over all the way into pretty much what would be the side wings on a normal car, and the headlights are cut out. It is a stylistic choice, it looks very good, but it is quite complicated to manufacture, and obviously with it being quite a complex shape and a moving piece, it does come with its compromises. So for example, if you look up closely at the bonnet shut line at the bottom here near the front bumper, that is not even. So the gap on the edge which is closest to the wheel is a little bit tighter than if we continue further down into the front grille. Okay, not too big of a deal, but if you look in here at the chrome surround trim which goes around the windows and the waistline, you will see that there is a massive misalignment. That's about 2-3 millimeters. Now, I'm not saying this is a deal breaker by any stretch of the imagination. In fact, I think it's not that big of a deal either. But if this was a Tesla, the internet would be up in arms about this, that Tesla doesn't know how to build cars, whereas with Minis somehow it's acceptable. Of course, what we also need to mention is the charging port. This is a very common issue where the piston or the locking mechanism fails. Either it seizes up completely and then you're stuck with a flap which you cannot open because there is no emergency release either, so you need to pry it open. Or what is more common is that there is a little bit of water ingress into the part because of poor design, and you get a consistent warning on the dash saying that the charge port is open even though it's not. Luckily the car lets you go into drive and you can still keep on using it, and it's such a common issue. If you go through the Mini Facebook groups and owner groups, you will see it pop up all the time. Some people are actually on their second one still while the car was with the original manufacturer warranty. So even if it's out of warranty, if you have a good service advisor at Mini/BMW, they can usually get that resolved without you having to pay for the part itself. I'm afraid the interior is not perfect either. It's a pretty nice place to be, just like a standard Mini Coupe, regardless of whether it's electric, petrol or diesel. But there's one very common fault, and it's really a design fault, and as far as I know there's no fix for it on the F56 generation of cars, which this is. So let me show you that I'm not making this up. I will just take my microphone off. If you look at the sunroof, there is this trim covering up the roller shades for the front and rear section of the sunroof. Now, in certain positions, when you hit this rattles like crazy. Now, it's not that big of a deal if you are driving and you have the music on, but especially if you are a crazy person like I am and you like to drive with no music on, you can definitely hear that because it's right above your head. And even if I just close the door, listen, that rattles like crazy. There's one hack, and that is if you move these shades about halfway out, it dramatically improves that, but obviously then you lose out on the functionality of the sunroof. So that's a shame that Mini hasn't come up with a better way of building that. Fake news. I take everything I said back, because in fact this is such a common issue that there is a bulletin issued by the NHTSA over in the US on how to fix this. And as you probably could have guessed, a little bit of felt tape did the job, so now it's moving on to chasing all the other rattles. This is quite known about Minis, hence why I just found it shocking that at least these Mini fanboys on the forum, you often hear, oh, it's built like a rock, it's the best thing ever. It's not. Since back the Mini Classic days, they are known to be quite rattly cars. And if you, for example, check out the video I did with the felt and electric conversion, I will leave that linked in the top right hand corner now, it still is the same thing. The guys explicitly told me it is like a Classic Mini, it drives like a go-kart, and it also squeaks and rattles like a Classic Mini. So I just think this whole being scared of moving the manufacturing into China with the new generation, I think honestly it's going to be possibly a little bit better built than the current one, because if we go by what Tesla is producing out of China, those cars are better than this. And yes, I just said it on the record, the latest Model 3s and Ys coming out of China, in my opinion, are better built than the Mini. As I mentioned, I wouldn't say it's a deal breaker, not for me personally, especially when you have the music on, you hardly notice it, but it's something to keep in mind, that this thing you often hear that Minis are perfectly built, well, it's not true in my eyes. Anyways, moving on to the next point, which is the built-in infotainment system, and specifically the navigation and the mapping system. It is pretty much shared with the BMW i3, but there are a few quirks which I will try my best to demonstrate so you understand what I'm saying. So for example, now I'm at Little Colchester and I notice they have a pot point just by the entrance, but if we look at the actual map in the Mini, you will see that the point of interest for the charger is located right on the main road. Obviously not too big of a deal in this case, because it's very obvious where the charger is, you can see it as you are passing by. But I've noticed that with some car parks, even when the charger is further away into the car park, it doesn't display properly, and it seems like it's either at the entrance or the neighboring junction, which can make it a bit tricky and confusing when you're desperately looking for the site when you're running low on charge and you don't want to miss your exit. And it's a bit bizarre, because if we look at the mapping information for the UK maps, which is the home country for this car, it does support over-the-air updates, and as you can see, it's on the 2023-2 version, which is fairly up to date, and I have never experienced any of these issues during my ownership with the i3, and obviously we deliver i3s all over the country, and as I said, always use the stock built-in navigation system, never experienced anything like it. You may be wondering, why do I insist on using the built-in sat-nav system so much? So let me try to demonstrate, because there are a couple of reasons. Firstly, if I want to navigate out of town right now, you will see that obviously the computer calculates the route, and it will also adjust my estimated remaining range based on the topography of the route, the speed limits and so on. And you see now that jumped down to 38 miles. And secondly, if I have something else showing in the central display, I can still see the navigational instructions in the instrument cluster on the bottom third here, including which lane to be in and so on. So that's very handy. On cars like this level 3, which are equipped with the heads-up display, if I very quickly activate that, the shield will pop out. And this is probably not going to come across on camera because it's very, very difficult to film. But then you can see the information projected right in front of you onto the road in this plastic shield, which is even more handy because you can basically drive without the navigation voice being on, yet you still know where exactly you need to turn. Speaking of spoken instructions, in certain scenarios when you are in complex roundabouts, it tells you to leave the roundabout a lot earlier than you actually should. So let's see whether it will do it here. We are taking the third exit.
Please leave the roundabout at the third exit. Now turn left.
Look, that was a very clear example because it literally sounded like it wanted me to take the previous one instead of the correct one. Again, not something I've ever experienced on the i3. In good news, if you don't care for any of this, you can still use Apple CarPlay with your favorite mapping app of choice, like for example Waze, because let's be honest, Waze is still unbeatable for real-time traffic updates. The CarPlay is very well integrated, just like on other BMW and Mini products. It's fully wireless, and because the Mini features a touchscreen, it's a lot easier to operate rather than using the jog wheel, which is a lot more suited for the built-in operating system. On this level 3 you also get a wireless phone charger in the armrest, but if you prefer wired charging, the level 3 also comes with a high-powered USB-C port. While we are on the interior, while I appreciate the iconic look, I think it's starting to look a little bit tired. I appreciate there has been the facelift since, which has improved some of the little buttons on the steering wheel and in the center console, but the layout is pretty much identical, where you have got a slightly bigger screen in the middle and a smaller digital instrument cluster. Obviously, that instrument cluster in front of you, that's one better that some other manufacturers do, like for example Tesla and Volvo with the latest EX30. But I just think that the screen by today's standards is a little bit small, and there is also a lot of physical buttons. And I appreciate I will definitely be in the minority on this one, but I just think this looks a little bit too cluttered. Yes, there are some which are very handy to have, like for example quick access to the heated seats without having to dig through menus in the infotainment system, but some are completely redundant, like for example AC. I don't remember the last time I had that off. Obviously I've got the temperature here, so that's nice and handy. And also the start-stop button that we could do away with. You know, the car should start automatically when you jump into it like some others. Traction control, I mean, it's quite funky that that's available as a shortcut, but that could be hidden in the infotainment and so on. So I think this could be radically simplified. Likewise, if we move further down into the center console, obviously the gear selector has been carried over directly from petrol and diesel Mini models with the automatic transmission. The only difference being that you don't get the manual shifting option, you just get this nice yellow highlight there to signify it's electric. But I would just much rather have the simple, small chicken nugget style toggle switch, which frees up a lot of space in here, because the other problem is that you've got the jog wheel, but as you can see, I think this just wasn't very well designed for right-hand drive, because it's not quite very ergonomic at all. So genuinely speaking, I have never pretty much used this at all. The only time was to click away all the messages I got about the charge flap being open while that was broken. But other than that, I just always use the touchscreen, and especially with Apple CarPlay, the touchscreen is the way to go. It's quite well positioned, it's very responsive, so that's no big deal. So that's where I stand with the inside. I know, just like I mentioned, with the new Chinese Mini coming out, the J01 car, that features a completely redesigned interior with most of the controls being thrown into the circular OLED screen. I didn't have a chance to try that one out in person, but I had a chance to sit in the Mini Countryman, which is a very similar interior layout, at the Munich Motor Show, and I really quite enjoyed it. I will leave that linked again at the top right hand corner. I covered that for Wisely. Let's move on to the seats, because they're absolutely excellent. Of course, again, carried over from the standard Mini interior, but you've got very strong side support, so even if you drive the Mini energetically, you are held in place. You've got a manually adjustable lumbar support as well, so even on longer journeys you will stay comfortable. It's more about the seating surface and the cover. So with the level 3, at least in the UK, you automatically get leather, and it's full animal leather. And I again realized that I'm in the minority on this one, being one of those crazy vegans. So I really would rather appreciate kind of a fabric or a fake man-made material on there. With the level 2, I think that's the sweet spot in terms of the seats, because you've got these kind of leather trims on the side, but the surface you sit on and for the backrest, that's cloth. And they actually look very, very smart in person as well. It's not like Mini cheaped out on those. The one practical side of things with the leather is obviously that if you spill something, or if you have the Wisely dog in the car, all of the residue is very nice and simple to wipe off. You don't have to get the wet pack out or anything like that. The drawback, and to be fair, this is the biggest drawback for me rather than the kind of animal welfare issue, is the fact that after jumping into lots of BMW i3s, which come with the standard cloth interior, these seats in the winter are noticeably colder, and even with the seat heating, it takes a lot longer for them to warm up. compared to the cloth. And likewise in the summer, this being black leather, it will get quite hot in the summer, so the moment you jump in the car, if you forget to precondition, you will definitely stick to them. The trim level will probably be one of the compromises which you have to decide on, because I love this level 3 because it comes with absolutely everything, and compared with the i3s, it's very difficult to find an i3 which was fully spec'd out, whereas here everything is bundled in, so that's fantastic. The Harman Kardon sound system is beautiful. Of course, you've got the sunroof, which yes, at this moment in time does rattle, but at least you've got the sunroof, you've got the head-up display, you've got the fantastic matrix LED lights, and as you can probably tell from the types of videos I make on this channel, I really appreciate all the gadgets and so on. But yeah, you can't spec out the leather seats and go for the cloth option, even though it's cheaper for Mini to manufacture. But I do know one person who managed to find a solution around that problem. So I will try to feature their car on the channel at some point in the near future, so make sure to subscribe if you want to see that. If all the Mini fans survived up until this point in the video without clicking the dislike button, I'm scared what's about to happen next, because my last complaint really is that the Mini Electric is front-wheel drive. And yes, I know, wait before typing the hate comment. Yes, Minis have always historically been front-wheel drive, and they had this go-karty character. But I think with the movement into electric, this was the perfect opportunity to switch to rear-wheel drive, because with electric cars, there's no question about it. If you just have a single motor setup, it makes sense to put that motor onto the rear axle underneath the boot floor and drive the rear wheels directly. Because if you, for example, accelerate out of a slippery junction, you've got a much better grip with the weight shifting towards the rear axle where the power is being delivered. I appreciate back in the day, obviously with combustion engines, this made a bit more sense, and in terms of the packaging point of view, this very much is built like a combustion engine car, with the heater and the electric motor being all housed under the bonnet, and quite neatly, I might add. But if you look at the history, for example, of VW, that's the perfect example of how things could have gone. With the Beetle, it was a rear-engined, rear-wheel drive vehicle at first, but then the Golf hatchback came along and VW started switching to front-wheel drive cars with the engine in the front, again because of better practicality and packaging and cost-saving reasons. But now with electrics, VW is going back to rear-wheel drive because that simply makes more sense. And I think with the Mini, I appreciate it feels like a go-kart, but wouldn't it feel like an even better go-kart if the motor was in the back, yet the suspension character was unchanged? So yeah, I think that's about it. Kudos to you if you made it this far into the video. As I said, it's a lovely car. I really enjoyed my time with it. I just wanted to throw the negative points out there, so if you're making a purchase decision, you know the positives and the negatives as well. To reiterate some of the good stuff, the range and charging is absolutely amazing, especially considering it's not the best on paper. The heating system and the ventilation system is really well done. The battery cooling is all good. You've got lots of gadgets on board, especially considering the class and price point of the vehicle. With the level 3, you practically get everything you could think of. It's well packaged, the seats are good, and most importantly, it's very fun to drive, which is what many of these smaller, cheaper electric cars lack, and you need to go a lot higher end to, for example, the Porsche Taycans, which cost a lot more money and are heavier vehicles. So the character is completely different. So with all of that said, I think it's officially time to wrap up the video. If you appreciate the perspective, make sure you hit the like button. If you disagree with me completely, I'm sure you would have left a comment by now saying how wrong I am. In good news, if you don't really mind the aspects which I pointed out about the Mini and you want to get your hands on one, this particular example will go up for sale at Wisely Automotive very shortly, depending on when you're watching this. So make sure to check out our Auto Trader page if you want to get this particular one. And yeah, I think that's it. Thank you very much for watching. See you in the next one. Make sure to subscribe for more EV content.